Danish always believed he was one of the lucky ones. At 28, he had a stable job in a well-known marketing company. His colleagues respected him because he worked hard, never delayed his projects, and always came prepared for meetings. Even his boss often said, "If only more employees worked like Danish, my life would be easier." Danish carried that respect with quiet pride. He wasn't arrogant, but deep inside he felt satisfied that he had built a good life for himself. But the thing that made his life look even more perfect in everyone's eyes was Sarah. She wasn't just his colleague. She was also his girlfriend. They had met at the same office 2 years ago. Sarah had joined as a fresh intern, nervous and shy. Danish had been the one to guide her, to show her how things worked. Slowly, late-night project deadlines had turned into long conversations. Long conversations had turned into coffee dates. And coffee dates had turned into something deeper. To everyone in the office, Danish and Sarah were the perfect couple. They worked together, they ate lunch together, they left the office together. Even at office parties, people joked, "You two should just get married already." Sarah always laughed at that, her hand resting on Danish's arm, her eyes shining like she had no secrets. But perfection is often an illusion. Danish didn't know it yet, but soon he was about to see cracks in that perfect image. It was a late Thursday evening when the first sign appeared. Danish had stayed back in the office to finish a client presentation. Most of the staff had already left. The large open floor was nearly silent except for the faint hum of computers and the soft click of his keyboard. He liked the quiet. It helped him focus. Around 9 p.m., he stretched, closed his laptop, and stood up to grab his coat. That's when he heard it. A soft laugh. At first, he thought it was just his imagination. After all, the office was usually empty by this time. But then he heard it again. A laugh that was light, playful, and strangely familiar. He froze, his ears straining. The sound was coming from the conference room at the end of the hall. He frowned. Who would still be here at this hour? Maybe someone was having a late meeting, he thought. But then he heard a second voice. A man's voice, speaking in low tones, followed by Sarah's laughter again. Danish's heart skipped a beat. That laugh. He knew it better than anyone. It was Sarah's laugh. But why was she here this late, and with someone else? He told himself not to overthink. Maybe she was just discussing work with another colleague. But still, something didn't feel right. That laugh didn't sound professional. It sounded personal. His footsteps were silent as he walked closer to the conference room, his chest tight. The glass walls had blinds half drawn, but through the small gap he could see 2 silhouettes inside. One was clearly Sarah's, her long hair falling over her shoulders. The other was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, leaning slightly too close to her. Danish's throat went dry. He pressed himself against the wall, listening. The man said something he couldn't fully catch, and Sarah giggled again, her voice dropping into a playful whisper. Danish clenched his fists. His heart wanted to storm inside, but his brain told him to wait, to listen. Then he heard words that made his blood run cold. Sarah's voice, soft and teasing. "Stop it. Someone might hear us." The man chuckled, low and confident. "Don't worry. Everyone's gone. It's just you and me." Danish felt like the floor had collapsed beneath his feet. His stomach churned. His girlfriend, the woman he had trusted with everything, was in there with another man, late at night, whispering and laughing as if he didn't exist. For a moment he couldn't move. His mind screamed 1,000 questions. Was this the first time? Who was that man? How long had this been happening? He wanted to burst through the door and confront them. He wanted to drag her out and demand answers. But something stopped him. A cold, heavy weight settled in his chest. If he confronted her now, she would deny it, twist it, maybe even cry and beg. And everyone at the office would hear, turning him into the fool, the jealous boyfriend who couldn't control his temper. No, he wouldn't give her that chance. He forced himself to step back, his hands shaking as he grabbed his bag and walked out of the office. Each step echoed in his ears, louder than his racing heart. By the time he reached the parking lot, his face was pale, his jaw clenched tight. That night, lying in his bed, Danish stared at the ceiling in the darkness. Sarah had texted him an hour later, saying, "Sorry, I got caught up in extra work. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night, Red Heart." He didn't reply. He couldn't, because her words felt like poison. The next morning, Sarah greeted him at the office with her usual bright smile, acting as if nothing had happened. She walked up to his desk, placed a coffee cup in front of him, and said, "Your favorite, double-shot espresso." Danish looked at her, his face calm but his heart burning. How could she stand there, smiling like she hadn't just betrayed him the night before? How could she look so normal, so confident, like she was untouchable? That was the moment Danish made a silent promise to himself. He would not scream. He would not fight. He would not let her control the story. Instead, he would watch. He would wait. And when the time came, he would make sure not just Sarah, but the entire office knew the truth. Because betrayal in love hurt deeply. But betrayal at work, in front of colleagues, friends, and superiors, cut even deeper. And Danish was not going to let her walk away unscathed. The perfect office life was over. The game of truth and revenge had just begun. The next few days at the office looked almost normal, at least on the surface. Danish forced himself to act like nothing was wrong, even though his chest still burned with the memory of Sarah's laughter in the conference room. She moved around the office with her usual energy, smiling at colleagues, sending playful messages on the group chat, and sometimes even leaning over Danish's desk like always. To everyone else, they were still the perfect couple. But inside Danish's mind, something had changed forever. Every time she touched his arm, every time she called his name with that sweet tone, he wondered, was this the same hand that touched him last night? Was this the same voice that whispered to another man in the dark conference room? Sarah thought she was clever. She thought Danish suspected nothing. But she had no idea that he had seen enough to never look at her the same way again. Danish had decided not to confront her in anger. Instead, he wanted the truth to expose itself, slowly, painfully, in a way she couldn't escape. So he began watching, quietly, carefully. It started with small things. He noticed how Sarah would sometimes disappear during lunch breaks. When he asked where she'd been, she casually said, "Just went to the cafe downstairs for a snack." But Danish knew she had already eaten with him just half an hour ago. Another time, she claimed she was stuck in a meeting, but when Danish walked by the meeting rooms, they were all empty. He didn't question her. Not yet. He just observed, making mental notes of every lie, every slip. One Friday evening, the office had a small get-together, a birthday celebration for one of their colleagues. Everyone gathered in the lounge, laughing and eating cake. Danish stood at the back, smiling politely, but his eyes never left Sarah. She was across the room, laughing with a group of coworkers. But what caught his attention was how one man stood closer to her than necessary. It was Imran, a senior team leader. He was popular in the office, known for his charm and confidence. He always had a crowd around him and people liked his easy humor. But Danish noticed something different this time. Imran's hand brushed against Sarah's arm as he spoke. She didn't pull away. In fact, she leaned closer, her smile just a little too wide, her laugh just a little too soft. Danish's jaw tightened. So it was him, the same man from the conference room. As the celebration ended and people started leaving, Sarah walked over to Danish, holding 2 slices of cake. "Here," she said with a grin, handing one to him. "You looked left out over there." Danish accepted it, forcing a smile. "Thanks." She didn't notice the way his eyes flicked briefly toward Imran, who was still watching from across the room. That night, Danish couldn't sleep. His thoughts kept circling back to Sarah and Imran. He remembered how Sarah used to blush whenever Danish made her laugh, how she used to send him texts during boring meetings just to say she missed him. Now, those smiles and blushes seemed reserved for someone else. The betrayal cut deep, but it also fueled a new determination. Danish knew one thing for sure. If he was going to bring out the truth, he needed proof. Concrete proof. Because Sarah was clever. She could twist words, fake tears, and act innocent. But once the evidence was in front of everyone, no amount of lies would save her. The next week, Danish started his quiet investigation. He adjusted his schedule, leaving work at unexpected times, returning suddenly, or taking different routes around the office just to see where Sarah went. Twice he caught her leaving the office to get some air, and returning 30 minutes later with a glow on her face that had nothing to do with fresh air. On one particular afternoon, Danish pretended to forget his wallet and went back upstairs after Sarah told him she was heading to the break room. Instead of finding her there, he spotted her near the stairwell, whispering into her phone. He stopped in the hallway, hidden behind a wall. Her voice was soft, filled with excitement. "Don't worry, I'll meet you tonight. Same place as before. Just don't be late. Okay?" She giggled quietly, then added, "You know I hate waiting." Danish's heart pounded. He gripped his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. Same place as before. That meant this wasn't just once or twice. This was regular, planned. He forced himself to step away quietly before she noticed. He didn't want her to know he had heard. Not yet. That evening, when Sarah texted him that she was working late on a project, Danish smiled bitterly. He knew better. Instead of going home, he parked his car a little distance away from the office and waited. Around 8:45 p.m., he saw her walking out. Not with her laptop or files, just her small purse. She wasn't dressed for work anymore. She had changed into a different outfit, a soft blue dress that Danish had never seen before. She walked quickly, looking around as if making sure no one saw her. Then a black car pulled up, and Imran stepped out, opening the passenger door with a smirk. Sarah slipped inside without hesitation. Danish sat frozen in his car, watching them drive off. His chest felt heavy, his jaw clenched so hard it hurt. But even as pain tore through him, his mind was cold and calculating. Now he knew for certain, and now he had a new mission. The next day at work, Sarah greeted him as usual, pretending nothing had happened. She placed a coffee cup on his desk and smiled sweetly. "Your favorite again. You're lucky to have me, you know?" Danish met her eyes and forced a smile. "Yes, very lucky." But behind that smile, something darker was brewing. Sarah thought she was safe. She thought her secrets were hidden in late-night whispers and stolen moments. She thought Danish was blind. But what she didn't know was that he was already planning the endgame. He wouldn't just confront her. He wouldn't just call her out. No, he was going to let her dig her own grave. And when the right moment came, when all eyes were on them, Danish would pull the mask off her face and show everyone exactly who she really was. The office still saw them as the perfect couple. But perfection was about to shatter. Danish woke up the next morning with a heavy mind. But this time there was no fog of confusion. The betrayal was clear now. The night before, he had seen Sarah leave with Imran. There was no more guessing, no more self-doubt, no more excuses to hide behind. His heart still ached, but his brain had taken over. He had decided that if Sarah thought she could lie and cheat under his nose, then she was about to learn how dangerous it was to underestimate him. At the office, everything looked the same. People tapped away at their keyboards, printers hummed, and phones rang in the background. Sarah came in with her usual cheerful energy, her heels clicking on the tiled floor. She stopped by Danish's desk, placed a sticky note on his monitor that said, "Lunch together?" Red heart, and winked before walking away. To anyone watching, it was a sweet, innocent gesture from a loving girlfriend. To Danish, it was another slap in the face. But he didn't let his emotions show. He nodded, smiled faintly, and pretended nothing was wrong. Inside, he was already planning his next moves. If he wanted revenge, he needed more than suspicions. He needed solid evidence. Evidence that no one could deny. He started with her phone habits. For weeks, he had ignored how she kept her phone face down on the desk, how she quickly locked it whenever he came close, and how she took calls in the hallway instead of in front of him. Now he paid close attention. During lunch breaks, he noticed her excusing herself for urgent messages. Once, while she went to the restroom, she left her phone on the table for just a moment. Danish saw the screen light up. A message popped up from I. Just a single letter. But he didn't need to guess who it was. The preview read, "Can't wait for tonight. Love? Danish's hand twitched toward the phone, but he stopped himself. Snatching it would make her suspicious. He needed to be smarter than that. That night, instead of going straight home, he stayed near the office parking lot again. He positioned his car where he could see without being seen. Around 8:30 p.m., Sarah came out again. She wasn't alone this time. Imran walked right beside her, laughing at something she said. They stopped near his car, and Danish felt his blood run cold when Imran leaned in and kissed her cheek. Sarah didn't pull away. She laughed, touching his arm before getting into the passenger seat. Danish gripped his steering wheel until his knuckles hurt. Rage burned inside him, but he forced himself to remain calm. This was exactly what he needed: visual proof. He quickly pulled out his phone and snapped pictures from a distance. The photos weren't crystal clear, but they were good enough to show Sarah leaving with Imran late at night. But pictures weren't enough. Sarah could always claim it was innocent: a work meeting, a carpool, anything. Danish needed undeniable evidence. The following week, he made friends with one of the IT staff members, Faisal. He knew Faisal from before, but they had never been close. Danish bought him coffee, shared jokes, and slowly gained his trust. One day, during lunch, Danish casually brought up the topic of office security. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "sometimes I wonder if people here really respect the company rules. All these late-night meetings. It makes me curious." Faisal laughed. "You'd be surprised what happens after hours. Some people use company systems for things they shouldn't." Danish leaned in slightly. "You mean like chatting?" Faisal shrugged. "Let's just say I see a lot more than I want to. People forget IT can access logs." That was the moment Danish realized he had his way in. Over the next few days, he carefully hinted that he suspected Sarah was hiding something. Faisal, being the type who loved a little gossip, eventually agreed to help. He showed Danish chat logs from the company's internal messaging system. There it was, in black and white, long conversations between Sarah and Imran, disguised as project discussions. But the timestamps told the real story. They messaged each other late at night, long after office hours. And buried in the conversations were little slips. Sarah typing, "Last night was amazing. Wish we had more time." Followed by Imran replying, "Patience, love, soon." Danish copied everything. Every word, every timestamp. But he wasn't done. He wanted more than just messages. He wanted undeniable, visual, and audible proof. So he bought a small recording device, something he could slip into the conference room where Sarah and Imran liked to meet. The next time she told him she'd be working late, he planted the device under the table earlier in the day. That night, he drove back, retrieved it, and listened in his car. His heart pounded as he heard Sarah's voice, soft and playful. "What if someone finds out?" Imran's deeper voice replied, "Relax. Everyone thinks you're still with Danish. He's too trusting to notice." Sarah giggled, then whispered, "You don't know him. He can be smarter than you think." Imran laughed. "Even if he finds out, what can he do? We control the office. He's just another employee." Danish sat in silence, the words stabbing him deeper than any knife could. They thought he was weak. They thought he was blind. They thought he was powerless. He replayed the recording again, this time with a smile forming on his face. They had no idea that their arrogance was building the very trap that would destroy them. The next day, Danish went to work as usual. Sarah kissed him on the cheek in the lobby, smiling brightly, as if nothing had happened. Danish returned the smile. No one could have guessed that under that calm face, he carried photos, chat logs, and recordings, a growing arsenal of evidence. Over the following weeks, he collected more. Screenshots of Sarah's late-night texts when she thought he was asleep. More photos of her slipping into Imran's car. More recordings of whispered conversations filled with lies. Every piece tightened the noose around their necks. But Danish didn't rush. He didn't confront her. He didn't let his anger control him. He wanted the perfect moment. A moment when everyone who thought Sarah was innocent, who thought Imran was respectable, would see their true faces. At the office, colleagues still admired Danish and Sarah as a couple. Some even joked, You two should just get married already. Perfect match. Sarah would laugh and nod, pretending everything was normal, while Imran smirked from across the room. Danish smiled too, but his smile was different. It wasn't the smile of love. It was the smile of a man sharpening his blade in silence. The cracks in the perfect office life were now wide open, and soon everyone would see what lay behind them. Sarah thought she had won. Imran thought he was untouchable, but Danish was about to prove them wrong. Very wrong. Danish had all the evidence he needed: photos, screenshots, recordings, even office chat logs. But evidence in his pocket wasn't enough. He wanted everyone to see, everyone to know. Sarah had played her little game, smiling in his face while betraying him behind his back. Imran had walked around with that smug arrogance, acting like the office was his kingdom. They thought they could humiliate Danish in silence. No, he would humiliate them in front of the entire office. But Danish knew one thing clearly: timing mattered. If he rushed, Sarah might twist the truth, cry, and play the victim. Imran might laugh it off, saying it was edited or taken out of context. No, Danish needed to strike when there was no room for excuses. He needed to trap them at the very moment when they felt most secure, most untouchable. The perfect opportunity came during the announcement of a big client project. The company had organized a full staff meeting on a Friday afternoon. Everyone was going to be there: managers, team leads, interns. Sarah and Imran had been working together on the project, and both were going to present parts of it. Danish knew this was it: a stage, an audience, and his targets standing proudly at the center. Couldn't get better than this. The week leading up to the meeting, Danish acted perfectly normal. He even went out of his way to be extra attentive to Sarah, just so she would never suspect anything. He brought her coffee in the mornings, complimented her work, and even joked about taking her out to dinner after the presentation. Sarah smiled and kissed him lightly on the cheek, saying, "See, this is why I love you. You always support me." Her words stung like poison, but Danish kept his face calm. Inside, he was already picturing her expression when her lies unraveled in front of everyone. On Thursday night, Sarah told him she had to stay late with Imran to polish the presentation. Danish smiled and nodded. "Of course, go ahead. I'm proud of you." She kissed him quickly before leaving, not knowing that Danish was once again parked outside, recording her laughter as she and Imran left together. By Friday morning, everything was ready. Danish had spent nights putting together a file. It wasn't messy, it was clean, organized, and devastating. First, the screenshots of late-night texts. Then, chat logs from office systems. Next, the photos of Sarah slipping into Imran's car. And finally, the audio recordings, where both of them mocked him and bragged about fooling everyone. He had it all prepared in a single folder on his laptop. The meeting began. Employees filed into the big conference hall, chatting excitedly. The atmosphere was full of energy. Danish sat quietly in the middle row, his laptop bag beside him. Sarah stood near the front, holding her notes. She wore a crisp white blouse and a confident smile. Imran adjusted his tie, laughing with a couple of managers. From where Danish sat, he could see how Sarah leaned a little too close to Imran when no one else was looking, how her eyes sparkled whenever he whispered something. The CEO welcomed everyone and introduced the agenda. Sarah and Imran were called up to present. They walked to the podium together, proud and polished. The lights dimmed slightly as their presentation appeared on the big screen. The audience listened attentively as they talked about strategies, budgets, and timelines. Danish pretended to take notes, but inside, his heartbeat was loud, steady, and ready. Finally, as Sarah wrapped up her part, she smiled at the room and said, "Thank you. We've put in a lot of effort, and we hope everyone sees how dedicated we are." The room filled with polite applause. That was his cue. Danish slowly stood up, adjusting his blazer. "Excuse me," he said loudly enough for the room to quiet down. Heads turned toward him. Sarah's smile flickered for a moment, but she quickly masked it with curiosity. Imran raised an eyebrow, irritated at the interruption. "I know we're all here to discuss work," Danish continued, his voice calm and steady. "But sometimes, What happens behind the scenes affects everything we do. Sometimes, dedication isn't what it looks like. The room grew still. People exchanged glances. The CEO frowned slightly, but didn't interrupt. Everyone wanted to know where this was going. Danish walked toward the front with his laptop. I think it's important to be transparent, to know who we trust in this office. And since Sarah and Imran worked so hard together on this project, I thought it would be good for everyone to see just how close they really are. Sarah's face drained of color. Imran shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. Danish connected his laptop to the projector. In seconds, the screen behind them changed, not the project slides, but photos. Photos of Sarah and Imran leaving the office late at night, getting into the car together. Gasps spread through the room. Sarah's hands trembled. Danish, what are you doing? Stop this right now. But he ignored her. He clicked again. Screenshots of messages appeared on the screen. Last night was perfect. I can't wait for you again. More gasps, whispers filling the air. People turned to look at Sarah, their admiration shifting into disgust. Please, Sarah said quickly, forcing a laugh. This is out of context. It's a joke. He's making it up. But Danish wasn't done. He clicked again. Now the audio played through the speakers. Imran's voice loud and clear. Relax. Everyone thinks you're still with Danish. He's too trusting to notice. And then Sarah's giggle followed. You don't know him. He can be smarter than you think. The room froze. Every whisper, every cough, every laugh stopped. Sarah's face was pale as chalk, her lips trembling. Imran's confidence shattered. His eyes darted around the room, looking for a way out. The CEO stood up, his face red with anger. What is the meaning of this? Danish finally turned to face Sarah and Imran directly. The meaning, he said calmly, is that while I was working, trusting, and supporting, these two were lying and laughing behind my back. They didn't just betray me. They betrayed this office. They used company time, company resources, to play their little games. Murmurs broke out everywhere. People whispered, I can't believe it. After all this time? In the office? Sarah burst into tears, reaching out toward Danish. Please don't do this. We can talk about it, just not here. Danish stepped back. No, Sarah. You wanted to play games in secret. You wanted to humiliate me in whispers and dark rooms. Now the truth belongs to everyone. This is the only conversation left. Imran tried to regain control. This is ridiculous. You can't just expose private. Private. Danish cut him off, his voice sharp. When you used office chat systems, when you sneaked into office rooms, when you laughed about me behind closed doors, there's nothing private about betraying your team, your company, and your so-called friends. The managers looked furious. The CEO's voice was cold. Imran, Sarah, my office. Now. The two walked out slowly, their heads lowered, while whispers followed them like shadows. Danish closed his laptop and returned to his seat calmly. His hands were steady. His voice never shook. He had planned this moment for weeks, and now it had unfolded perfectly. As he sat down, colleagues glanced at him with wide eyes. Some gave him small nods of respect. No one had expected quiet, dependable Danish to strike so fiercely. He didn't smile, but inside he felt a deep satisfaction. Sarah and Imran thought he was weak. They thought he would never notice. They thought they were untouchable. But now their masks were ripped away. And this was only the beginning of their downfall. Danish sat in his apartment that night, his mind racing with plans. He knew Sarah was arrogant enough to believe she was still untouchable, still clever enough to hide her betrayal behind fake smiles and office charm. But she had no idea that the walls around her were already closing in. Danish had spent weeks collecting evidence, and every detail was sharp, undeniable, and ready to be used at the perfect moment. He had emails, secret recordings of their whispers in the conference room, and screenshots of late-night chats she thought were deleted. Every piece was like a blade in his hand, and soon he would strike. The next day at the office, Sarah acted as though nothing was wrong. She walked past Danish with that same sweet smile, the one that once made his heart race but now made his stomach twist in disgust. Her hand brushed the shoulder of the man she had betrayed him with, their manager, Adil. Danish's fists clenched, but he forced himself to stay calm. His revenge wasn't about anger anymore. It was about exposing the truth so completely that Sarah would have nowhere left to run. At lunch, Danish sat quietly with a few coworkers, pretending to listen as they gossiped about office politics. He noticed how Sarah laughed loudly at another table, leaning too close to Adil, ignoring the risk of being caught. That arrogance only fueled his determination. He thought, you won't laugh when everyone knows. You won't smirk when your lies come crashing down. That evening, Danish stayed behind again. The office was nearly empty, the lights dim, the hallways quiet. He entered the conference room where so many of their secret meetings had taken place. He placed a small file on the table, printed chats, recordings saved on a USB, and photos of Sarah and Adil sneaking out together after hours. He stared at it for a long moment, almost hearing their voices mocking him, before sliding it back into his bag. The evidence was ready, but the timing had to be perfect. The company was preparing for a big staff meeting at the end of the week, one where the CEO himself would attend. It was the kind of meeting where everyone important would be present, managers, team leads, and staff from every department. Danish knew that this would be his moment. If Sarah wanted to play games in secret, he would drag those secrets into the light where no one could ignore them. The night before the meeting, Sarah called Danish, pretending as if they were still in a normal relationship. "Hey, are you okay? You've been so quiet lately," she said in her usual soft tone. Danish forced a smile into his voice and replied, "Just tired from work. Don't worry about me." She laughed lightly, unaware that he was no longer the naive man she thought she could control. When the call ended, Danish whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, everything changes." The next morning, tension filled the air as employees prepared for the big meeting. Danish watched Sarah from across the room. She wore her best outfit, her hair perfectly done, her confidence glowing. To everyone else, she looked like a star employee. To Danish, she looked like a snake preparing to bite. As the meeting began, the CEO praised the company's progress. The managers nodded in approval, and staff clapped politely. Sarah sat near Adil, exchanging secret smiles, believing they were invisible. Danish sat a few rows back, his bag resting at his feet, the evidence burning inside like fire waiting to be released. Finally, when it was time for staff to share their reports, Danish raised his hand. All eyes turned to him. His voice was calm, steady, but every word carried weight. "Before I present my report, there's something important the company should know. Something about honesty, loyalty, and respect, values we claim to uphold here." Sarah's smile faltered. Adil shifted uncomfortably. A strange silence spread through the room. Danish continued, "Some people believe they can hide their actions in shadows, but shadows don't last forever. The truth always comes out." Slowly, he reached into his bag and pulled out the file. His heart pounded, but his eyes never left Sarah's face. He laid the evidence on the table for everyone to see. "This," he said, his voice clear, "is what has been happening behind closed doors. Lies, betrayal, and disrespect. Not just to me, but to this entire office." Gasps filled the room as he played a recording from the USB. The sound of Sarah's laughter, mixed with Adil's voice whispering promises, echoed through the hall. Sarah's face turned pale, her hands trembling. Adil's jaw tightened, his career flashing before his eyes. The CEO's expression darkened as he realized the scandal brewing right under his nose. Sarah tried to speak, her voice shaking. This isn't what it looks like." But Danish cut her off, his tone sharp. "It's exactly what it looks like. And now everyone knows the truth." The room buzzed with shock, whispers, and disbelief. For years, Sarah had walked with confidence, believing she could control the story. But in that moment, the story was no longer hers. Danish had taken back the power she stole from him, and she had nowhere to hide. As the meeting ended in chaos, Sarah and Adil were called aside by the CEO for a private discussion. The once respected couple now looked like criminals awaiting judgment. Danish walked out of the room, his head high, the weight of betrayal finally lifted. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Sarah wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. And for Danish, the real test of strength was still to come. Would Sarah try to strike back? Or had he already destroyed her world beyond repair? The answer waited just around the corner, and Danish was ready. The office was never the same after that meeting. Whispers followed Sarah everywhere she went. Once admired for her charm and intelligence, she now walked through hallways filled with suspicion and judgment. People who used to greet her with smiles now looked away, whispering behind her back. Adil, too, had lost his usual arrogance. His reputation as a respected manager was ruined, and every step he took felt like walking on broken glass. Danish, however, walked with quiet strength. He had exposed the truth, but he knew deep inside that Sarah wasn't the kind of person to give up easily. She would fight back, desperate to save what little pride she had left. It didn't take long for her to try. A few days later, Sarah barged into Danish's apartment without warning. Her eyes were wild, her hair messy, and her voice cracked with anger. "You ruined me," she screamed. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My career is gone. Adil is avoiding me, and everyone looks at me like I'm dirt. You think you've won? You've destroyed both of us." Danish stayed calm. He looked at her with steady eyes and replied, "No, Sarah, you destroyed yourself. I only showed people what you were hiding." She collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, Danish almost saw the woman he once loved, the woman who had laughed with him in happy days, the woman he thought would stand by his side forever. But that image shattered as quickly as it came. This woman before him was a stranger, a liar, a manipulator who had played with his trust. In desperation, Sarah tried to twist the situation. She leaned closer to him, her voice suddenly soft. "Danish, we can fix this. Forget everything. We can start over, just you and me. No one else has to matter." Her hand reached for his, trembling with false affection. But Danish pulled away, his voice sharp and final. "You don't get it, Sarah. I don't want to fix anything with you. What we had is dead. You buried it the moment you chose betrayal. I won't let you drag me down into your lies again." Her face hardened. "If you won't forgive me, then I'll make sure you regret this. I'll tell everyone you forged those recordings. I'll destroy your reputation the way you destroyed mine," she threatened. Danish's lips curled into a cold smile. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. "You can try, but I've already made copies of everything. Emails, recordings, photos, they're stored safely with people who will release them if anything happens to me. If you think you can scare me, you're wrong. I've prepared for every move you could make." Sarah's bravado crumbled. She realized then that she had lost completely. Danish had been one step ahead, planning every detail while she had been busy laughing in shadows. Now, her career was over, her reputation shattered, and the man she betrayed no longer cared enough to save her. In the weeks that followed, the company launched a formal investigation. Adil was demoted, stripped of his power, and eventually forced to resign. Sarah, unable to face the shame, quietly left the company. Rumors spread that she tried applying elsewhere, but every new employer discovered the scandal that followed her. No office wanted to hire someone known for betrayal and dishonesty. Danish, on the other hand, earned quiet respect from his coworkers. People admired his strength, though he never bragged about what he had done. He focused on his work, built new friendships, and rebuilt his life step by step. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it no longer controlled him. Instead, it gave him a new kind of power, the knowledge that he had faced his darkest moment and risen stronger. Months later, Danish was walking home from work when he saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench outside a small cafe. It was Sarah. She looked nothing like the confident woman she once was. Her clothes were simple, her hair unkempt, and her eyes hollow with regret. When she noticed him, she stood quickly, shame written all over her face. "Danish, please just listen. I made mistakes, but I'm suffering every day. I have nothing left. No friends, no job, no respect. I need help. For a long moment, Danish just looked at her. He remembered the nights she had laughed behind his back, the lies she told, the betrayal she chose. He felt no anger now, only a cold clarity. Finally, he said in a steady voice, "You once thought you were untouchable. You cut me down, mocked me, and threw away everything we had. Now you're the one standing in the ruins. That's not my fault, Sarah. That's yours." Her tears fell harder. "So you won't help me?" Danish shook his head slowly. "No, I've already helped you once. I gave you my trust, my love, and my loyalty. You destroyed it, and some things can never be repaired." Without another word, he walked away, leaving her standing alone on the street. For the first time, Sarah realized the full weight of what she had lost. Not just her career, not just her reputation, but the one person who had truly cared for her. Danish, on the other hand, walked forward into his new life. He carried scars, yes, but also wisdom. He had learned that betrayal could break a man, but it could also build him stronger if he chose to rise. And as he stepped into the bright evening light, one thing was clear. He had not only exposed Sarah's lies, he had freed himself from them forever. The revenge was complete. Subscribe and like for more stories.